They fired me not knowing I secretly own the workplace revenge story, have everything back on our desk by noon. That was it. No greeting, no appreciation. Just a folder, a deadline, and 3 HR faces staring at me like they were announcing my funeral. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw that Outlook invite pop up for urgent meeting at 11:00 a.m. No details. No agenda, just a cold subject line, transition conversation. In corporate language, that means we're about to strip you of your dignity with official stationery. At 11:01, I was already seated across from Cynthia from HR, queen of beige cardigans and zero expression. Next to her stood some legal guy who looked like he'd rather disappear into the wallpaper than make eye contact. And then there was Miles, my brand, new regional VP. He looked like a walking body spray commercial with that blinding smile and his favorite hobby, taking credit for other people's work. He leaned against the wall like he was rehearsing to play charming villain in a cheesy holiday movie. Didn't speak, just watched, looking pleased with himself. I'm sure he practices that look every morning. Cynthia finally spoke. Samantha, your position advantage is being transitioned out effective immediately. Please return your laptop, access card, and any company property by noon. No mention of the 10 years I gave that place. Not a word. No mention of the fact that I took the Westlake branch from an empty dirt plot to one of the company's strongest regions. Nothing, just by noon. It was 11:06. I didn't react, didn't ask for a reason, because let's be real, I already knew. You only get ambushed like this when office politics have been cooking behind closed doors. And ever since Miles dropped in 6 months ago with his shiny resume and ego the size of a billboard, he'd been circling my role like prey. My achievements suddenly became team wins. My staff slowly shuffled away to other managers. My calendar sliced up like a holiday turkey. Meetings removed as if I was fading out of existence. I just met their eyes and said, understood. No tears, no anger, solid. That's when Miles finally showed a grin, the kind that said he expected me to crack. That smirk screamed, I got you. But the irony, he wasn't even playing the right game. They shut down my email before I even stood up. One moment I was Samantha Ellis, senior regional strategist responsible for 7 territories, the closer of 18 major leases, mentor to future leaders, and keynote speaker at the last 2 conferences. The next moment, I was just a person with no badge. I walked back to my office and the door clicked behind me like a prison timer. Slack went silent, my work phone restarted in my hand, 114 unread emails, and suddenly none of them mattered. Cynthia waited outside like I might sprint off with the office furniture. Inside, I packed slowly on purpose, like I was sorting the last pieces of a crime scene. Took down the picture of my dog, folded my backup flats into my bag, threw away a half-eaten trail mix. Every move intentional. Let them watch, let them believe they'd won, but I had one last drawer, bottom right. Locked, only I had the key. Nobody ever wondered what I kept there. I unlocked it and took out a thin black leather folder. No label, no logo. I paused for a moment, then slipped it inside my coat pocket. That folder was my safety net. Miles strolled past the glass wall, slowing down just enough to check if I'd broken down. I hadn't. I was actually humming. He tilted his head like it confused him that I wasn't throwing office supplies. I gave him a smile, not a polite one, the kind that says, I'm ahead of you, and you don't even know it. My assistant Kelsey poked her head in. Poor girl, looked like she'd just learned Disney was a money laundering front. You okay? She whispered. I nodded. Yeah, I'll be more than okay. At 11:58, I returned everything. Badge, laptop, company car keys. Signed whatever they shoved in front of me without bothering to skim it. Cynthia almost looked let down that I didn't melt down. She even said, we appreciate your professionalism. I nearly laughed, if only she had a clue. By 12:30, I no longer existed in their system. My name disappeared from the directory. The woman who led the entire southern expansion, saved the Westlake site from collapsing through 3 vendor disasters, was erased like a typo. But I didn't walk out empty. I walked out with the one thing they should have checked for. And by the time they realized what I still possessed, their chance to fix it would be long gone. The lights above my desk flickered for a second as the monitor shut down, like even the bulbs knew something was about to blow up. My inbox was already a graveyard. A cheerful banner blinked at the top, access revoked, contact administrator. Right, they killed my account so fast it probably fried a server somewhere. One document was still open on the screen, a vendor contract I'd spent 6 weeks negotiating. All those hours gone with a click, like I was a temp who lost a stapler. I grabbed the cardboard box they'd left for me. Cheap, flimsy, probably reused from someone else's exit. Corporate's version of a body bag. I started packing the small things. My mug, "Don't talk to me until Q3 ends," a joke gift from our last offsite. The framed photo of my nephew with a marshmallow stuck in his ear. My tiny desk cactus, now drooping as if it got fired too. Then I looked up, and there he was, Miles, sitting in his glass office at the perfect vantage point, perched like some smug gargoyle with a title, sipping from his stainless steel Yeti and staring right at me, not working, not on a call, just waiting for a meltdown. "Sorry, Miles, no theatrics today." I packed with calm, steady movements, like I'd rehearsed this 100 times. Then I reached for the bottom right drawer, the one no one else ever touched. It had a small brass lock, and the key hung on a chain under my blouse. Not for effect, for protection. Inside was the folder. Slim, black leather. No name, no branding. I ran my fingers along the edge for a second, like parting ways with an old ally. This wasn't a keepsake. This was a grenade. The pin was still in, but it wasn't there for decoration. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat. Good wool, charcoal gray, tailored well enough to hide 100 regrets and one very powerful explosive. Inside that folder was the original lease for the Westlake property, signed 4 years ago during a frantic corporate rush when legal was too busy covering another fire. The deadline was harsh. Our acquisition window was about to slam shut. So I created an LLC called Westridge Holdings, signed the lease through my own company, and once the branch was fully set up and running, I handed everything over. Simple, clean, and completely above board. But here's the twist. They never transferred the lease into Vantage's name. They were supposed to. I reminded them more than once, Miles included. I even have email chains with his name on them, flagged in bright red, unopened for 327 days. They never completed the ownership transfer, which meant that the folder in my coat was the only legal document linking Vantage to the building they believed was theirs. Kelsey popped back into my doorway. Poor girl always looked like a nervous baby deer dressed by a mid-tier Target stylist. She looked ready to apologize for a situation she had nothing to do with. "You okay?" she asked softly. I didn't pause, dropped the little cactus into the box like planting a victory marker and said, "Yeah, I'll be just fine." And I wasn't lying. Out in the hallway, people pretended they didn't see me. Colleagues scuttled past my door like I was contagious. No eye contact, no small talk. Nobody wanted to be the next one on the chopping block. That's how it always works. One day you're the backbone of the team, the next day HR treats you like you're radioactive. At 11:30, Miles stepped out of his office and stretched like a smug country club lawyer right before lying under oath. He glanced over, like he expected a goodbye, maybe even gratitude. I didn't give him so much as a nod. By 11:35, the lid on my box was taped shut. The leather folder was safe inside my coat. No exit interview. No emotional goodbyes. Just a very promising future waiting for me. My badge light flashed red when I tried to scan out. Already deactivated. I couldn't help smiling. They were in a rush. A security guard had to buzz me out. He gave me that uncomfortable half-smile people use when they stumble into someone crying in a restroom. I returned a polite nod and headed out. When those doors closed behind me, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning, something no one else could see coming, not yet. 3 years earlier, that Westlake property was nothing but a soggy parking lot and a sad billboard for a coming soon yogurt emporium, plus about a dozen stray cats living under a rusted hot dog cart. Nobody with sense thought that land was worth anything. Except me, and maybe the zoning clerk who approved my permit forms after I slid over a six-pack of Diet Dr. Pepper. We were stuck. Our Dallas lease was expiring, our client list was swelling, and HQ wanted a fully operational regional hub in 3 months. Legal was bouncing paperwork around like we were trying to build a maximum security prison behind a kindergarten. Every week was a new roadblock, waiting on compliance review, need third-party assessment, still reviewing Clause 15B. In the middle of all that chaos, the developer called and said, "If we don't have a signed lease by Friday, we're moving on." It was Tuesday. So I did what I've always done. I fixed the problem. I set up Westridge Holdings as a single-member LLC under my cousin's accounting office address and a throwaway email. Filed the documents, printed the lease, signed it myself on behalf of my own company. Westridge became the official leaseholder. Not Vantage, not their legal team, me. I didn't set it up to be sneaky or build some secret kingdom. I did it to keep the deal alive, and it worked. Construction started on schedule, fiber was laid, parking lot redone. By the end of Q2, employees were sitting in ergonomic chairs in a fully running hub. Everyone celebrated. They handed me a plaque. Miles, who was still a junior back then, got promoted for strategic deal acceleration, which is hilarious considering he was on paternity leave in Aspen when the lease was actually signed. Once the site was operational, I handed internal management over. Facilities handled vendors, IT ran the servers. HR ruined morale, as usual, but I never finalized the transfer of the lease. Nobody followed up, nobody cared. The building worked, that was enough for them until now, and the funny part, I warned them. I emailed Miles the day he oiled his way into Westlake acting like a self-tanned messiah. Subject, outstanding documentation site lease assignment. I spelled everything out, the LLC, the lease chain, the need for legal reassignment. You know what I got in return? Nothing. Not even a will review. Because reading documentation wasn't flashy enough for Miles. If he couldn't brag about it on LinkedIn, it didn't exist in his world, which meant the folder I carried out after they fired me contained the original lease. Still active, still valid, still under Westridge Holdings, still mine. It hit me around midnight. I was on my couch, a little wine drunk, eating cold Chinese. Flipping through the folder like it was a magic trick. Every signature, every clause, renewal terms, all intact. The building wasn't just office space. It was a delicate house of cards, and I happened to be the foundation piece. They fired me, but forgot to remove the owner. My name wasn't on the lobby directory, but it sure was on the deed. My LLC controlled every vendor contract, every maintenance request, the signage rights, even the key card system. Their prized regional hub relied on the woman they kicked out without blinking. And I didn't need to lift a finger. Just wait for the power glitches, wait for badge access failures. Wait for someone to finally ask the question they should have asked 3 years ago. Who actually owns this building? And when that moment came, I'd already have my coffee poured, because now they were the ones locked out. At 7:08 the next morning, my phone rang with a number I didn't know. 703 area code, Virginia, corporate HQ. I stared at it, sipped my lukewarm coffee, and let it ring out. They called again 2 minutes later. This time I picked up. Samantha Ellis. The voice on the other end was shaky, like he was hiding in a supply closet. "This is Jeremy Chen from Corporate Legal. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I smiled. "Oh, Jeremy, I always have time for legal. What's going on?" Papers shuffled. I pictured him in a cubicle with the plastic still on the chair, frantically reading a lease he didn't know existed yesterday. "We have a situation," he whispered. "It appears the lease for the Westlake property isn't under the company's name." "That's correct," I said, calm as a Sunday crossword. "Silence, it's under West Holdings," he asked, like he was praying I'd say just kidding. I didn't. I glanced at the open folder on my kitchen table next to a half-eaten kvass and a sticky note that said leverage. "That's also correct. Westridge Holdings LLC, formed March 14th, 3 years ago, filed in Texas, owned by me." Right, he muttered. "And just to confirm, you're the sole member?" "Yes, Jeremy, sole member, managing partner, leaseholder. Want me to email you a PDF of the original filing?" There was a long pause. I could almost hear the panic hit him. I wasn't aware of that. It seems this wasn't fully recorded on our side. "Really, that's odd," I said. "I sent several reminders, one to facilities, one to legal, and at least one to your boss's boss, Miles Hall. Subject line, outstanding documentation site lease assignment. I can resend them if you'd like." He didn't answer that, just breathed into the phone like he was swallowing a meltdown. At last he managed, "Ms. Ellis, we'd like to understand your intentions. As you know, the Westlake Hub is a major operational location. We've already run into some difficulties this morning." I let the word settle. "Difficulties," I said, full of fake concern. "Oh no, what kind of difficulties?" "A few badge access errors, some vendor confusion, nothing serious," he rushed out. "Too fast, I nodded to myself. "Well, Jeremy, here's the reality. Westridge Holdings is a privately held company, and as far as I'm aware, the lease remains active and fully compliant. If Vantage would like to discuss next steps, I'm open to a formal conversation, with counsel present, of course." He released a long breath. "Of course. Great. Just let me know how you'd like to move forward," I said, then ended the call. Because here's what Jeremy hadn't figured out yet, and what Miles was too busy polishing his image to grasp. They didn't own anything. Not a square inch of that building, not legally, not on paper, not at all. The parking lot, mine, the rooftop signage, filed through a third-party contract I personally approved. HVAC, janitorial, coffee service, elevator maintenance, security. All routed through Westridge Holdings. The entire building ran through one central point, and I held it. They could erase my login, wipe my photo, pretend I never existed. But they couldn't erase a signed contract. They definitely couldn't turn the lights back on without me. By 8:02, my phone buzzed again. A frantic message from Kelsey, sent from her personal phone. "Do you know why we can't access the Westlake file server? The VPN says it's tied to the building's static IP. Oh, sweet Kelsey. Because I assigned that static IP when we set up the network, and no one ever changed it. They assumed it would stay forever. But things only stay solid when you respect the person holding everything together." I made a second cup of coffee, put on a bit of lipstick, and opened a new Google Doc titled West Holdings Transition Options. I wasn't angry, not even triumphant. I was simply executing the plan. They wanted a clean cut. Instead, they handed me leverage wrapped in urgency with legal trailing behind like a bow. And the real entertainment hadn't even kicked in yet. By 8:25, the first email thread started melting down. Subject, urgent. Badge access not working Westlake site CC. Operations, facilities, HR, IT, and beautifully, Miles. Employees were outside the building, unable to enter. Not a glitch, not a system outage. Just a blinking red light saying, "You no longer belong here." Middle managers started questioning if they were still employed, or if they were ghosts on a forgotten org chart. Someone attempted the side door, triggered an alarm, and guess who got the call? Me, from the contracted security company. Chuck, the security lead for 2 years, cheerfully asked, "Morning, Samantha. Want us to keep the building on lockdown?" "Yes," I said. "Property remains private until arrangements are made. Copy that," he replied like I'd asked for a plant to be watered, not frozen a Fortune 500 office into a corporate snow globe. By 9:36, the coffee vendor texted me. "Karen from Roastworks Mobile Brew, hey love, we're locked out. They haven't paid the last invoice. Should we still deliver? Karen is a gem." I told her to pause deliveries for 48 hours. She sent a thumbs up and a GIF of a dumpster fire labeled Monday Vibes. By 09:55, IT discovered they couldn't get into the server room. The keycard for that door, controlled by the security vendor, the override credentials filed with me. Facilities tried an old master code. Didn't work. I changed it after a break-in 2 years ago. They never updated their notes. Why would I? No one ever checked. Inside it became frantic chaos. Managers yanking cables, calling outdated vendors, ordering IT to fix it now. Like magic. It was corporate whack. A mole with panic as the soundtrack. Miles reportedly showed up around 9:15 in a North Face jacket, wearing the face of a man recognized from a legal nightmare on a first date. He tried to badge in, denied, tried again, denied. Miles eventually gave up on the badge scanner and stood outside making phone calls with that tight. Simmering anger usually seen at airports when flights are canceled, or when someone is hit with a surprise dental bill. That's when facilities broke. A message popped up on my Signal app. The same secure channel we used years ago for sensitive bill. Without coordination. "Derek Facilities, please tell me you don't actually own the whole building." I let him marinate in that anxiety for a full 10 minutes before replying. "Me, wouldn't say I own it, just that I have significant influence over how it functions." He sent back a single GIF. Nicolas Cage tossing a match into a pool of gasoline. By 10:09, HR had gathered off-site because their meeting room at Westlake was also locked. I imagine it sounded something like this. "Who handled this?" "I thought legal did." "Didn't she send a memo?" "What even is Westridge Holdings?" Jeremy, my nervous friend in corporate legal, followed up with an email. Subject: clarification needed operational access from Jeremy Chen. He wrote that the Westlake site was facing major access challenges and asked if Westridge was actively enforcing any restrictions and whether I'd be willing to join a call that day. At 10:30, I replied, "Me, happy to discuss. Please send an agenda and the names of everyone attending. I'll be bringing representation." Jeremy answered asking if 3:00 p.m. worked. Me, perfect. Please bring copies of the lease. You'll want them. At 10:45, a mass email went out to all Westlake staff. Due to unforeseen technical issues, employees should work from home until further notice. Unforeseen. Corporate code for. We didn't read the fine print, and now the woman we fired controls the building. Somewhere in the dark break room, my leftover kale salad was probably evolving into a monster. I hoped it grew fangs. Meanwhile, my phone kept lighting up. Vendor after vendor called me. Not Miles, not HR, not legal, me. Because while they were busy deleting my name from the company systems, they forgot to check whose name was on the property. Suddenly, the question wasn't how do we replace Samantha? It was how do we get in the building? At 12:40 p.m., an email slid into my personal inbox like a raccoon sneaking into a church potluck. From Mailto mhalbrook82@gmail. Com subject, touching base, hey Samantha. Any chance we could grab a quick coffee and clear the air? I think there's a solution that works for everyone. If you're free this afternoon, let me know. No hard feelings. Just want to talk like adults. Emmett was the email equivalent of a limp handshake after a mugging. No CC, no legal signature, off the record. He wanted to pretend the last day never happened over a latte. I waited 23 minutes before replying. Subject, touching base 3:00 p.m. Works, my counsel will join. Please share the meeting location and any documents you'd like reviewed beforehand. 5 minutes later. Miles, let's keep it casual. No need for lawyers yet, just us. I didn't respond. Silence was intentional at 2:58 p.m. I walked into the conference room at the downtown coworking space he'd rented. I recognized it from when we interviewed temps there last year. Bland decor, cucumber, infused water, and just enough soundproofing for HR-free honesty. Miles was already inside, trying to appear relaxed. Shirt unbuttoned one notch too far. No tie, laptop open, pretending to be friendly. He stood when I entered, wearing that same smirk he'd had when he cut my badge. Samantha, he said, arms open like we were cousins at a barbecue. Glad you came. No reason this can't stay civil, right? I didn't answer. My attorney, Diane Kaplan, sat beside me. Gray blazer, blunt bun, composed expression that said she'd dismantled bigger egos before breakfast. She placed a leather binder on the table and unzipped it with the calm of someone about to present receipts. Miles sat, fiddling with his smartwatch like he was looking for a ruinous mistake. Button, look, he started. We're adults, nobody wants this dragged out. There have been hiccups, but I think there's a solution that benefits everyone. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside was a proposed agreement, a one-time payment as appreciation for past contributions. In exchange for full rights to the lease and vendor contracts, low 6 figures, pre-tax. I didn't touch it. Instead, I pulled out the lease agreement, page marked. Clause highlighted, page 9, section Roman 4. Early termination by tenant requires 180 days payment at current market rate plus penalties listed in Appendix C. I placed it in front of him. Diane spoke first. Mr. Halbrook, the terms are explicit. Early termination or reassignment requires 6 months of payments at $25, $700 per month, plus a 23% administrative penalty and transition fees. That's assuming Ms. Ellis even agrees to transfer ownership. Miles blinked. We weren't aware of the penalty clause. I nearly laughed. You signed the lease, I finally said. The color drained from his face. I let the silence sit. The overhead lights buzzed like an awkward choir, while he processed the financial disaster he had walked into wearing confidence and flip-flops. Look, he tried again, hands out like he was offering a truce at a toll booth. Let's not make this messy. You don't want to draw. Now legal fight. What do you actually want? Wrong move. Diane closed her binder with the finality of a judge ending a trial. I think we're finished here, she said. I stood, straightened my coat, picked up the lease, and slid it back into my bag like a sacred document. At the door, I glanced back just long enough for him to see my face. Not smug, not angry, just done. You should read your emails, Miles, I said, and the lease, especially the part where I warned you. Outside, the wind had picked up. My coat lifted behind me as I crossed to Diane's car. My phone pinged. From Jeremy Chin, we'd like to resume discussions. Executive leadership will attend this time. Are you available tomorrow? I didn't answer, not yet, because now my time had value. And it wasn't going to come cheap. By 7:16 the next morning, I had 5 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and a leaked internal memo sitting in my inbox. Not sent to me, of course, forwarded anonymously from an encrypted burner address named Truth Sprinkler at Proton Mail. It was a report from legal to the board. Subject, urgent leaseholder issue at Westlake Hub. It was a masterpiece. 6 pages of corporate panic at its finest. Key gems included: lease executed under time pressure without full legal review, signing manager, Mr. Miles Halbrook failed to complete required asset transfer, utilities, naming rights, and vendor contracts remain with Westridge Holdings. Samantha Ellis, corporate exposure level. High. Recommendation: immediate containment strategy, and at the top, in bold red font, who approved this lease? Answer: Miles, and now everyone knew it. By 8:00 a.m., the board called an emergency video meeting. I wasn't invited, but Diane was on my behalf. They didn't ask for me. They requested her. They wanted to explore resolution options and reduce regional risk. Translation: we set the house on fire, and the woman we fired is holding the fire extinguisher. More receipts rolled in. Facilities confirmed the rooftop signage was tied to a naming rights clause under Westridge. The big stone monument out front, funded through a site enhancement package billed to my LLC. The contractors, architects, electricians, even the guy who installed the exit signs, every invoice had run through my QuickBooks. They could have discovered all of this a year ago, but no one reads the paperwork until the walls start dripping. At 9:03 a.m., I received an email from a senior board member named Ruth Caldwell. First time she had ever contacted me. She usually lived somewhere 10 floors above the rest of the company. Ruth lived somewhere high up in the clouds of strategy decks and shareholder slides, far above the rest of us. Subject: request for discussion, West Holdings. Miss Ellis, I understand there has been confusion surrounding the leasing and operations framework for the Westlake site. I would value the opportunity to speak with you directly. Please advise on your availability this week. Ruth Caldwell, SVP Strategy and Oversight, Vantage & Co. It took everything in me not to reply, "Oh, now you want to talk." Instead, I forwarded it to Diane with a short text, "Your move." Because at this point, it was no longer about being right. It was about control, and suddenly I had all of it. Miles, on the other hand, had none. At 10:17, an internal notice leaked on LinkedIn. Not public, but visible to employees. Effective immediately, Mr. Miles Halbrook will step away from regional leadership duties pending review. We appreciate his contributions. Translation: we found the smoking gun and its wearing yacht, scented cologne and Italian loafers. The final blow had been an old email thread from 3 years ago. Me, legal, Miles, and facilities. I had clearly outlined the Westridge structure, flagged the urgency, and included a direct note: please confirm receipt. Leaseholder entity remains separate until reassigned. His response: looks good. Thanks for moving fast, signing now. No legal review, no follow-up, just a signature, likely with the same pen he used to sign off that I was redundant. By noon, the board was split, half furious about the incompetence, half scrambling to find a way to keep the building open without admitting they'd fired the architect mid-build. Meanwhile, I sat on my patio with iced tea, watching the emails come in. Can we hop on a call? Would you consider a revised agreement? We'd be happy to fly you to HQ at your convenience. 3 days ago, I didn't exist. Now I was indispensable. Amazing what happens when your name is on the property, and theirs is on a stack of assumptions. Miles thought he removed a threat. What he actually did was unplug the generator, and now they were sitting in the dark, asking me to flip the switch. By Thursday morning, they dropped the misunderstanding act. At 8:41 a.m., a new email arrived from Bridget Langley, EVP Corporate Strategy. Subject: West Holdings urgent resolution. Her tone was crisp, direct, the email equivalent of laying down a linen napkin before sliding a knife across the table. She wrote that Vantage wanted to formally acquire Westridge Holdings and all associated rights to secure long-term stability. She requested a call to no small talk, no fake warmth, just business. Diane and I went through it over coffee. She's damage control, Diane said. They're skipping HR and legal because both are radioactive right now. We agreed on a noon call. No video, just audio. Bridget opened with no fluff. Miss Ellis, thank you for joining. I'll be direct. Vantage wants this settled. We are prepared to purchase Westridge Holdings and consolidate all rights. What would secure a fast agreement? Straight to it. No offer, no ceiling. Translation, name your price. I didn't hesitate. I'd spent 3 days reviewing every line of every document. I knew exactly what I held, not just the lease, not just access, but naming rights, signage, vendor exclusivity contracts, and infrastructure agreements that still build through my LLC. So I spelled it out. Clear, professional, and surgical. 1. Full acquisition of Westridge Holdings, including all rights and privileges. 2. A performance-based pay out equal to 3 years of regional executive tier bonus metrics. I would provide the numbers. 3. A written board, signed statement acknowledging my role in establishing, structuring, and executing the Westlake expansion. This would be added to internal records and copied to my attorney. 4. A 60-day consulting retainer, activated at my discretion, if Vantage required transitional support. Bridget didn't argue, didn't flinch. She simply said, understood, you'll have a draft by end of day. Cold. Efficient, all business. The tone of someone who realizes the building is on fire. And the person holding the deed and the extinguisher has the same name. At 3:35 p.m., the first draft of the acquisition agreement landed in Diane's inbox. The payout terms were laid out clearly. They didn't dare come in low. They knew this wasn't just a financial transaction. They were buying time, reputation, and the ability to pretend everything had always been under control. In a separate PDF was the draft of the internal acknowledgement letter. No flowery praise, no corporate poetry, just facts, but it used one word that mattered: foundational. Samantha Ellis was the foundational strategist behind the development and operational stability of the Vantage Westlake Hub. All core infrastructure and vendor alignment were established under her direction and through her entity, Westridge Holdings. Reading it, I didn't feel triumph or gloating. Just balance. This wasn't revenge, it was correction. They stripped away my role, my title, my seat at the table. I reclaimed something equal in return: control, recognition, payment. Now the scales were even, and they weren't paying for the lease. They were paying to keep the illusion that they'd always been in charge. Funny how power changes hands. Not in shouting matches, legal battles, or grand speeches. It changes quietly, in a conference room, during a calm phone call, when the person you tried to erase turns out to be the only one holding the blueprint. By 5:00 p.m., Diane had pushed back on 2 clauses and asked for a wire schedule. The storm was nearly over, but I wasn't done. I had one last move left, not for money, for impact. The wire room felt almost like a chapel. Soft humming lights overhead, no windows, no noise. Just numbers being treated with reverence. Diane sat beside me, relaxed, as if she'd done this 1,000 times and knew the ending already. The bank rep typed with practiced precision, then turned the monitor. There it is, he said quietly, like he didn't want to startle the balance. 6 figures. Real board. Approved apology. Soaked digits resting in my account like an orderly army of zeros whispering, "You were right, and here's proof." Diane nodded. "Funds are cleared. Congratulations, Miss Ellis." It should have felt like victory, like a final stage in a game. Instead, it felt clean, like removing a splinter, just relief that the irritation was gone. A knock interrupted the stillness. A courier in a tan blazer and Vantage badge stepped in, clipboard raised like he was delivering condolences. He handed me a sealed packet. Inside, the full buyout documents tabbed, signed by every department head, and one final sheet printed on thick paper, carrying the signature of the board chair. We acknowledge Samantha Ellis as the foundational architect of the Westlake Hub. Her strategic direction, operational leadership, and decisive action during the expansion remain integral to the company's continued success. Not flashy, not emotional, but official, permanent, unchangeable. It confirmed one truth. I wasn't just part of the machine. I built the room the machine lived in. As Diane packed up, I stood and stretched. My coat, the same one I wore the day they fired me, hung on the chair. Next to it sat the once precious leather folder, now empty, a spent match. We walked outside into crisp fall air. I didn't look back until we reached the Vantage building across the street. Workers were finally entering again. Some avoided eye contact, some nodded carefully. Fresh banners hung outside. New posters lined the lobby walls. One of them had a quote, my quote from a planning memo 3 years earlier, back when I still believed loyalty worked both ways. Don't build for today. Build so someone can inherit what you leave behind tomorrow. No attribution, just stolen corporate wisdom from the ghosts they thought they erased. I smiled because they didn't inherit my legacy, they bought it. Every inch, every clause, every keycard. They could remove my name from the wall, but it was now baked into the structure like stone. I didn't yell. I didn't fight. I didn't rally a team or wage a dramatic war. I simply let them bury themselves, then invoiced them for the shovel. I slid into Diane's car, shut the door, and as the building faded in the rear-view mirror, I didn't think about revenge. I thought about leverage because I never needed to raise my voice. I just needed to raise the price.